Anyhow, the jury convicted me. At my sentencing, the district attorney stood up and said, well, Gloria Killian's never been in trouble before. As far as we know, she's going to have a parking ticket. So she should get more time than anybody. And I did. They sentenced me to 32 years to life, which meant that I had to serve probably about 24 actual years before I was even eligible to go to the parole board. And they shipped me down to prison. 90 days after I got to prison, Gary Massey wrote a letter to the district attorney in which he said, I lied my ass off on the stand for you. I gave you Killian. What do you do for me? And they suppressed it. He recanted in writing 3 separate times. And they never, ever contacted me or disclosed any of this evidence. Had they followed the rules, I would have been out of prison, back in court with a new trial, and probably not even that within a year. Instead, I ended up spending a total of 17 and a half years incarcerated. This case went on for 22 years. And even after that, there was still some involvement that came up later. They put me in the law library, which saved my sanity, because that's where I learned about people who go to prison. Like Joe, I only speak to what I know, so I speak about women in prison. And women go to prison for very different reasons. I would like to spend the next 2 hours telling you about women in prison. However, we're here to talk about the death penalty. And the rest of my journey through the system is very, very indicative of why the death penalty doesn't work, why we have so many innocent people in prison, and what really goes on. I've been in prison about 10 and a half years. In the meantime, I had met a woman named Joyce Wright, who became a very good friend of mine, and she said, why don't you let me hire an investigator? And I said, nah, not doing good. Well, she did it anyhow. The investigator went to Sacramento, and he discovered that letter. He comes back with that letter and writes his long brief about, appears that I'm certainly innocent. And then I get a letter from the attorneys for my co-defendant on death row. And they said, we have to come and see you. We have to talk to you. But they started pushing me and pressuring me, so I got on my high horse and said, absolutely not. I have nothing to say to you people. Fortunately, my investigators straightened that out. And they showed up with all of this evidence. They had the letters, they had the recantations, they had the suppressed evidence, they had it all. And they said, we know you're innocent, we really want to help you. But we can't represent you, of course, thank you, because of the conflict of interest, so get yourself a lawyer. Well, one of the things I've been able to do while I was in prison was to create a law project with USC, who now, they come out and they represent the women in prison. So my friend Joyce went to lunch with the professors. They gave her a list of 5 names, and Bill Janego's name was on the top of the list. Joyce hired Bill. She paid him $100,000, and then she ran out of money. During my evidentiary hearing, my aunt, before she died, had put $20,000 in an irrevocable trust that I was not ever to touch until I got out of prison. Well, it was pretty clear I wasn't getting out of prison, so my uncle figured a way to break the trust. We used that. And my attorney himself probably paid $150,000 more to get me out of prison. That's another reason why it's so bad. It costs a fortune. The expenses are unbelievable. At my evidentiary hearing, my evidentiary, each volume, it had over 1,000 pages in it. Well, you had to have 14 volumes prepared. That's a lot of photocopying when you take a look at it. The expenses are just enormous. And I would say conservatively, my freedom cost at least $250,000. Because the other thing is that the Attorney General doesn't have a budget. Nobody cuts off their paychecks, and they can spend and spend and spend and spend. And they did. They fought my case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. When my decision was reversed, I went to my evidentiary hearing in Sacramento, and the judge, at the hearing, he said, I don't know, I think I'm going to have to reverse this case. I've never seen anything quite like it. And then 5 months later, he issued an opinion. The opinion started by saying it is extremely rare for one in the federal courts, for one to ever see such a demonstrable case of actual innocence. He went on for 63 pages and then proceeded to deny it. He made every finding of fact in my favor. And we had been really confident. But the one thing we forgot was we were back in Sacramento. And everybody does try just a little bit harder in Sacramento to make sure things come out the way they want. My case went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And my opinion was actually written by a former federal prosecutor, who went on to say that it was one of the most egregious cases of prosecutorial misconduct that they had ever seen. To reverse my opinion, it hit the LA Times, it hit all the national newspapers, everybody knew about it, the staff was running in the prison going, is she still here, is she still here? And I sat there for another 4 months because they wouldn't let me out. The basic problem that they had with my case is they could never retry me. They could say what they wanted, they could jump up and down, they could talk about, oh yeah, we're going to take her back, we'll convict her. But the court had totally thrown out the false evidence of the witness. They didn't have anything else to work with. So they decided instead that they would get their last pound of flesh the hard way. Finally, the Ninth Circuit said, well, you know, either you let her out or somebody in your office is going to be finding a cell of their very own. So they let me out on a $250,000 bail. Now, when I was accused of this crime, you know, when I was the wicked accused murderess, my bail was $25,000, and I was out for years on that bail. But they made me post a $250,000 bail. Nobody had that kind of money, of course not. But All Saints Church in Pasadena raised $15,000 cash, and my wonderful lawyer found a bondsman who would just write the bond and take $15,000 and not worry about it. Then they put me on federal probation. I had to fly to Sacramento to meet the head of the probation department, who said, I have no idea what to do with you. Maybe you could just call in every week. How about if I assign somebody for you to call? But the fact remains, I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything, and it was getting so spooky, so scary, that 48 Hours was filming me at the time. They actually brought a camera to our house, and they taught Joyce how to use it, just in case something went down. Finally, it went on, like I said, they took it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no way, this case is over, it's done. And that was the end of it. Well, not quite. Not quite. A couple of years later, the ACLU flew me to Washington, D.C. to testify on something known as the Streamlined Procedures Act. The Streamlined Procedures Act stated purpose was to streamline the death penalty. In other words, let's get out here and get these people killed in a reasonable amount of time. The problem with it is it basically eliminated federal habeas corpus relief for anybody. The author of the bill, Senator Kyle, actually said to me, well, it wouldn't be a problem for you. You can prove you're innocent, so of course you could have habeas. Senator, if I could prove I was innocent, I wouldn't be in prison, so then I wouldn't need federal habeas relief. And so everybody went round and round on that one for a while. But I met Senator Dianne Feinstein, and we really bonded, probably because she actually began her public service career as a member of the old Women's Parole Board at the prison where I had been all these years. As a result, she became very engaged with this whole argument, recognizing, you know, how easy it was to lock up innocent people and they'd never be able to get out. So she began talking about me. You know, I was in the Judiciary Committee, we were in front of the Congress, we were in front of the Senate, we were just like all over the place. And the author of the bill on the House side, because in Congress you have to have the bill authored in both the Congress, on the House and the Senate side. The author of the bill just happened to be, it was Dan Lundgren, who just happened to be the Attorney General when I was convicted. He really wasn't too happy about this, and neither was anybody else. So they contacted the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, and they persuaded Kathleen Scully to sign a letter that they sent to Senator Feinstein and the members of the Select Committee, in which they said, we understand Gloria Killian is still, you know, is running around there claiming to be some kind of expert about something. Well, let us tell you the real truth. She's a liar, she's a killer, she's a vicious person, and the only problem is we can't seem to prove any of this, but we do know this. And then they went on to lie about my case, which is what they have always done from the beginning of time. And that is actually what took them down, because they actually misstated some of the facts in the case. The other thing is they did not realize who had been backing this effort. The Washington Justice Project, the ACLU, there were a lot of heavy political hitters involved. And so the fight was on.